So I think we're in a place where we can start talking a little bit about modes. And to try and help you understand what a mode is, I thought it'd be good to start with a question. And my question is this: what's the difference between the keys of A minor and C major? Well, it's not the notes that they contain, is it? Because they both contain exactly the same notes if we ignore the melodic and the harmonic minor. And they're just all the white keys on a piano, okay? So if it's not the notes, what is it? Well, in A minor, your root chord is an A minor chord. Not surprisingly, it's built from the root, the third and the fifth. And you'll find that the phrases that you use, the melody lines that you create, weave around that kind of A minor. They'll use the A minor chord tones in them as well. And you'll create chord sequences that will use other chords like D minor, E minor. And when you improvise over this, you'll start to emphasize these kinds of minor characteristics of the scale. In contrast with C major, well, your root chord is a major chord. It's the C major chord, yeah? And again, you'll start building chords and chord sequences, and they'll use chords like C, F, and G in there as well. And when you improvise over that, you'll be emphasizing some of these chord tones as well, naturally. And so the music that you create when you're working in A minor is really quite different to the music that you create when you work in C major, because you're emphasizing different chord tones and you're using different root chords and different chord progressions. Now, there are 7 notes in the major scale, and we're just talking about 2 different scales that have a root note which is based on 2 of them. So one's based on the C note, one's based on the A note, which means that there are another 5 notes in the major scale that we could potentially use as root notes. And can we get away with that? Well, the answer is yes, and this is all a mode is. So all a mode is a variation of a scale where you choose a different note in that scale and you use that as the root note, and you build your harmony up around that root note, and you build your melody up around that root note, just as you do when you're playing in A minor and in C major. Now, it doesn't really matter what the scale is. You can make modes out of any scale. And in jazz, for example, they use modes from the melodic and the harmonic minor as well. But for the purposes of these lessons, I'm just going to focus on the major scale. Okay, so when we look at the modes of the major scale, we use them regularly enough to give them individual names as well. And these names are based on Greek city-states for historic reasons. And I won't go into too much detail about each of them individually in this video. We'll cover that later. But you'll see the first mode of the major scale is identical to the major scale itself. So in C, this would be C Ionian. So C Ionian and the C major scale are the same thing, yeah? The next mode is based on the next degree of the scale, and in C major that would be D, and the chord would be D minor, and the mode would be D Dorian, okay? And then after that you've got an E, and if you look at that chord, that's E minor, and the mode associated with this is E Phrygian. Then we have F, and this is F major, coming from the C major scale, and this mode would be F Lydian. Then G Mixolydian, again it's another major chord, and then A Aeolian, and A Aeolian is the same as our normal A minor scale or our A natural minor scale, so what we've been working with previously up until now. And then we have B diminished. So this is a weird mode. It's the only mode of the major scale that has a diminished chord as its root chord. And this is called D Locrian. And then finally, we're back up to C again. Okay, C Ionian. Okay, so there's 7 modes there. Does that mean I have to learn 7 scales Or could I take advantage of the fact that they're all based on the major scale? So why don't I just learn the major scale and know that I can use each of the degrees and base my mode on that? Will that work? Well, the answer to that is a kind of a worried yes. It does kind of work, but if that's all you do, then you'll probably not be very successful in using modes. And the reason is, if you come at, say, E Phrygian and you think, okay, E Phrygian is the same as C major, therefore I'll just play my C major licks and lines and things like that, and that'll just work, won't it? Well, it won't work, because as we said before, you know, when we were talking about the major and the minor and what's the difference between the major and the minor, the difference is in the harmony, the difference is in the notes that you emphasize, where the root notes are and the functions of all of the other degrees in that mode as well. So it doesn't really work like that. So is there a better way? Well, yes, I think there is. And the way I like to approach it is to look at the modes in a little bit more detail and then split them up into groups. So if you have a look at the modes, you'll see that there are 3 major modes, and all the major mode is a mode where the root chord is a major chord. So they would be the Ionian, there would be the Lydian and the Mixolydian. And there are 3 minor modes as well, and these would be the Aeolian, the Dorian and the Phrygian. And finally, there would be the Locrian, which is that weirdo mode which has a diminished root chord. So I'm going to ignore the Locrian for a moment. Maybe we'll talk about that in a later video, and we're going to focus just on the other 6. So if we look at the major modes for a moment, and we compare them to the major pentatonic scale. So if you look at the notes in the major pentatonic, so I'll just use this root position. We've got a root note, we've got a second, a third, a fifth, a sixth, and there's a root again in the major pentatonic. Now we know that we can use the major pentatonic in the major scale because we did that. We just added an extra 2 notes. We added the 4th and the 7th to make the major scale. Okay, so if we have a look at the Lydian mode for a moment, you can see that that has the same pentatonic inside it. So we can use the major pentatonic to play the Lydian mode as well, because these 5 notes are all contained in the Lydian scale. And the only thing that's different is in the 2 other notes that we add. And actually it's only one of those 2 notes that's different from the major scale, which is a 4th, which is sharpened. So we have a root, 2nd, 3rd, sharp 4, 5, 6, 7, and there's a root again. So that's how you make the Lydian mode. And let's have a look at the Mixolydian mode. Well, if you look at that, you can see again inside it is the same major pentatonic scale. So we can just use the major pentatonic scale in whenever we're playing the Ionian mode or the normal major scale, whenever we're playing the Lydian mode or whenever we're playing the Mixolydian mode. And in the case of the Mixolydian mode, you can see the only difference is that 7th is flattened. So we have a flattened 7th. Okay, so that makes the Mixolydian note. So that gives us a framework to work with when we're playing any of the major modes. We know we can start with the associated major pentatonic scale, and then the modal characteristic comes out of the 2 additional notes that we add to that pentatonic to build it up into a full scale. So what about the minor scale? Well, let's do the same trick. We'll start with the minor pentatonic. And in this case, if we look at the notes in that, we have a root, a flat 3rd, 4th, 5th, flat 7th, and there's a root again. And when we turn this into a minor scale, the natural minor scale, we added the 2nd and the flat 6. Okay, so that gives us our natural minor mode, natural minor scale, or the Aeolian mode. What about the Dorian mode then? So if I have a look at that, let's look for the pentatonic in there again. And again, you can see it's right in there. You've got those same 5 notes in the Dorian mode as you do in the normal minor mode as well. And if you look at those extra notes, we can see that flat 6 is naturalized, and then we've got the flat 7th and the root. So the Dorian is only 1 note different from the normal minor mode. What about the Phrygian? Well, again, we look at the Phrygian and we can see inside it, it has the minor pentatonic scale. Okay, so we can use the minor pentatonic scale when we're playing Dorian and Phrygian and Aeolian. They all have this minor pentatonic scale inside them. And the only difference for the Phrygian this time is that flattened second. Okay, so that gives us a framework to work with. Okay, now when it comes to learning these, one of the things I like to do to sort of accelerate the learning of these is to group pairs of modes together. And you may not have realized it, but I've already been doing this with the major scale and the minor scale. What we did is right at the start, we understood the pentatonic scale. We learned how the pentatonic scale worked, how you use this over in major keys and in minor keys. And we understood how to sort of emphasize tones to bring out the majorness or the minorness of the underlying harmony. And then with that knowledge, what I did was I added an extra 2 notes to the pentatonic scale, and that created our full major scale, and it created our natural minor scale. And again, we can use the knowledge of the pentatonic scale and how to emphasize one set of notes over the other, how to emphasize the majorness or the minorness to play in, C major or A minor. And we learnt that as a group, that is a pair of scales. And actually that is our first pair of modes that we've just learnt, which is the Ionian mode, which is the major scale, and the Aeolian mode, which is the minor scale. And similarly, we can group the Dorian mode with the Lydian mode. And if you have a look at both of those, they contain exactly the same notes, exactly the same pentatonic scale, but in the case of the Dorian mode, we emphasize the minorness of that sound of that group of notes, and in the Lydian, we emphasize the majorness of that group of notes. And similarly, we can do the same thing with the Mixolydian and the Phrygian. And again, the Phrygian has the minor sound and the Mixolydian has the major sound. So in doing that, we can sort of, incorporate the sounds of these modes that much quicker. Now, in the case of the Locrian, well, to be fair, the Locrian very rarely gets used as a mode, as a modal center for music. It's quite fun to do, and maybe we will talk about it. I know I've put videos about this up on YouTube as well, so by all means, go and check that one out. But maybe we will talk about it in this course as well. But what I want you to do between now and the next lesson is just go back to that pentatonic scale and just refresh that difference, how you use the pentatonic scale in a minor context versus how you use it in a major context. See if you can get that clear in your head. So you've got that ability to differentiate those minor sounds to those major sounds, because that's what we'll be building on in the next few lessons. Now, there's a whole load of stuff. There's all of the Greek city-state names and everything. I've put them all in the course text down below on the course as well. So if you signed up for that, then you've got all of these in front of you. If you're not signed up for it, then help yourself. It's a free course. I'm not going to charge anything for it. So, just check it out and you'll have the video and you'll have all of the text and everything. And you'll have all of the other lessons as well. And as I add new lessons, I'll email everyone in that group to say, hi guys, there's a new lesson available. So that's it for this week, and we'll chat next time. Goodbye.